Today, we are diving into a 2,000-year-old debate, all about bread. And trust me, this is way more interesting than it sounds, because this isn't really about baking. It's about how an ancient, super-specific ritual can totally change how we define the everyday things around us, right down to the food on our plate.
So let's jump right in. The whole thing starts with this amazing logic puzzle that connects an ancient temple ceremony to a problem you might actually have in your kitchen. And the question is this: at what point does a piece of bread stop being, bread? Okay, so our story doesn't start in a bakery. It starts in the ancient temple in Jerusalem. There was this special grain offering called a meal offering, and it came with this incredibly precise, almost microscopic set of rules for how you had to prepare and break it. Now, look at how specific these rules were. And they changed depending on who you were. If you were a regular Israelite, your offering was folded twice and then broken into completely separate pieces. But if you were a priest, same folding process, but you had to leave the pieces connected. And the high priest? His wasn't folded at all. Weird, right?
So this tiny detail is what everything hinges on. Why on earth would an Israelite's offering need to be completely broken apart while a priest's was kept together? This little distinction, well, it became the first clue in a much, much bigger puzzle.
So how did the rabbis figure this out? Well, to get to the why, they first had to nail down the how. They went straight to the source text, the Torah, to basically deconstruct the very meaning of the word breaking.
Okay, so for the Israelites' offering, the process was unbelievably meticulous. You start with one wafer, you fold it in half, then you fold that in half again so you have 4 sections. But here's the critical final step. You then have to fully separate those 4 sections into distinct individual pieces. The rabbis really zeroed in on this one verse. The Hebrew here, patot ota petim, uses what's called a doubled form of the verb to break. Now, to them, that wasn't just for flair. It was a literal instruction. It meant you don't just break it once, you break it, and then you break it again to make sure you end up with multiple separate pieces. And this is where they drew a really fine line. The whole point was to create pieces, pisim. You break the wafer to get pieces, but you don't then break the pieces themselves. If you go too far, you don't have pieces anymore, you just have perurit, crumbs. The goal here was precise separation, not complete demolition. So we've got these ancient, intricate rules about wafers in a temple. Why should we care? Well, this is where the whole discussion takes this wild turn and connects a super obscure temple law directly to your dinner table. It all started when a sage named Rav Yosef asked this question. Think about a stew, or maybe stuffing, that has bits of bread cooked right into it. What blessing are you supposed to say before you eat that? It sounds so simple, but the answer is anything but. See, you have 2 choices. Hamatzi is the special, specific blessing for bread. Mezonot is the blessing for pretty much all other grain-based foods, like cake or pasta. So the blessing you say completely depends on whether those little bits of bread in your stew are, legally speaking, still considered bread. Now, to solve this modern problem, Rav Yosef did something brilliant. He reached all the way back to that temple ritual. He remembered a key detail from the meal offering. Each of those broken pieces had to be a certain minimum size, a kazait, which is about the volume of an olive. His logic was just beautiful. The priests in the temple would say the hamotzi blessing over those olive-sized pieces before they ate them. So Rav Yosef argued, an olive's bulk must be the official minimum size for something to count as bread. Simple, right? If the pieces in your dish are that big, you say hamotzi. If they're smaller, you say mezonot. Case closed. But this is the Talmud. And in the Talmud, no easy answer ever goes unchallenged. A colleague, a really sharp-witted sage named Abaye, immediately spotted a huge potential flaw in this neat, size-based rule.
Abai brings up a totally different situation. He points to a law about Passover. During Passover, you have to eat matzah. And the law is clear. If you just gather up enough tiny crumbs of matzah to equal the volume of an olive, that counts. You fulfilled your religious obligation.
And that was Abaye's checkmate moment. Think about it. If a pile of tiny crumbs is legally bread for something as important as Passover, how can it not be bread when it comes to saying a simple blessing? All of a sudden, that strict size rule just doesn't hold up.
So this challenge just blew the conversation wide open. The sages had to get more creative. Maybe the size of the individual piece isn't the most important thing.
What if it matters where the crumb came from? Maybe crumbs that were broken off a big important loaf of bread still carry the status of bread, in a way that other random crumbs don't.
So let's get to the grand finale. How did the rabbis actually settle this incredibly detailed debate? Well, the final answer isn't a simple rule. It's a much more sophisticated way of looking at the world.
The final ruling, which comes from two other sages, Rav Sheshet and Rava, brilliantly pulls all the arguments together. They basically say, okay, you're all kind of right. Size isn't the only factor. Pieces smaller than an olive can still be bread. And yes, origin matters. Where it came from is important. But they added a third, absolutely crucial criteria.
And this is the clincher. It all comes down to a concept called toret dinama, which is Aramaic for the appearance of bread. The pieces have to still be recognizable as bread. I mean, think about it. If the bread in your stew has totally dissolved into a formless, soupy mush, it's lost its identity. It's not bread anymore. But if you can still look at it and say, hey, that's a piece of bread, then no matter how small it is, it's still bread.
And there you have it. What started with the hyper-specific rules for a temple sacrifice ended up giving us this profound philosophical tool. To know what something is, you have to look at more than its size. You have to consider its origin, and most importantly, whether it still looks like what it once was.
This whole exercise in logic is just a powerful reminder, isn't it? Sometimes the answers to our biggest questions aren't hiding in some grand theory. They're tucked away in the tiny details of the smallest rules. It makes you wonder, what other huge truths are just waiting to be found in the fine print of our own lives?